Solomonic magic in Indonesia. Welcome. I'm actually indebted to Dr. Justin Sleg's channel, Esoterica, for prompting my interest in Solomon, and indeed listening to his narrative about Solomonic, or narratives I should say, about Solomonic magic. Now, if you've not already looked at Esoterica, I can't recommend it strongly enough. It's absolutely excellent, and it's often a source of massive interest in me. In Indonesia, Solomon's often mentioned, and elements of Solomonic magic are in evidence, but I've never really been sure of its origins and never really looked into it to any great degree, because, as you know, I'm really interested in Kejawen. But, you know, as I say, Dr. Justin Sledge, he's prompted this interest, so I've made this vlog, and it is indeed, I believe, interesting. The Testament of Solomon. Solomon is one of the most important figures in the Western magical tradition. But the earliest mention of Solomon is within the Testament of Solomon, part myth and maybe part grimoire, although it doesn't go that far into being grimoire. The wisdom of Solomon can be found in the Talmud and in the Old Testament. Eusephus, a Romano-Jewish historian, tells us about his control over demons, using his ring and his ability to conduct exorcism. Solomon is mentioned in the Dead Sea Scrolls for his ability to conduct these exorcisms. The Testament of Solomon describes how Solomon constructed the Temple of Jerusalem using jinn. Although it's anonymous, it may be written in the 1st or 2nd century, certainly prior to the 4th century. And Dr. Sledge argues that it's probably written by a Christian Jew, maybe in Roman Palestine, although he also points to Greco-Egyptian elements. Its focus is on exorcism, as seen as sort of a medical practice. The problem with its origin is that it's certainly been changed and added to over the centuries and when it's been translated. So there do exist many versions. Indeed, the focus on exorcism appears to have been added to with Egyptian demonology. Then there are other magic traditions that appear to have been added from Byzantium. It claims that Solomon had designs on a youth engaged in building of his temple. He asked God to intervene to bring the youth to him. The youth is said to be plagued by a demon. It talks about his thumb, but that could actually be a phallic symbol. The Archangel Michael then brings the ring with the seal of Solomon to Solomon, although, as Dr. Sledge argues, there's many versions of the seal. The ring exposes the demon abusing the youth, enabling Solomon to bind the demons and use them in the construction of the temple. In fact, Solomon is led by the original demon to the prince of demons, Beelzebub, and this therefore enables the binding of all other demons. It therefore lists a demonology which forms the basis of the Solomonic magic tradition. However, the Temple of Solomon only speaks about magic, not how to do it. So maybe I was a little bit too hasty in describing it as a grimoire. The Lesser Key of Solomon, or the Legamenton. The Lesser Key of Solomon is an anonymous grimoire on demonology, which really is the foundation of the Western ceremonial magic tradition. It was compiled in the mid-17th century, mostly from materials a couple of centuries older. It's nominally compiled of 5 books: the Ars Goetia, the Ars Theurgia-Goetia, the Ars Paulina, the Ars Almadel, and the Ars Notoria. The names of 72 demons are found in the Ars Goetia. Maybe I should say spirits, because of some of these demons are believed to be good. As a result of multiple translations, there are multiple spellings of some of these names. The demons are described as being commanded by 4 kings of the cardinal direction: Amayan, the east; Korsun, the west; Zinimar, the north; and Garb, the south. A footnote in one variant edition instead lists them as Orians or Urians, Piaman or Piaman, Aritone or Agin, Amayon or Aminion, alternatively known as Samuel, Azriel, Aziel and Mazaziel, their rabbinic names. It explains how to bind these demons using a triangle and vessels, the use of circles to protect the musician, how to evoke these demons, the use of incense, use of astrological timing, particular clothing the magician should wear, including a lion skin belt for in one particular part, construction of wax signals and scrying. Of course, it was fundamental to the Golden Dawn, and this is really why it's now so important within the West. Solomon, or Suleiman ibn Daud in Islam, in the earliest narrative involving Solomon in Al-Quran, Surah 21:78, alludes to the story of Solomon that was in the company of his father, and then two men came to ask David to judge between them regarding a hearth, a field. Later Muslim commenters expanded on the allusion, including Al-Tabriri, Badawi and Ibn Kathir. The story itself is used to illustrate Solomon's wisdom and level of judgment, which Al-Quran says would characterise Solomon throughout his life. Indeed, he's known as al-Hikmah, or wisdom, Suleiman al-Hikmah, or Solomon wise. Solomon was believed to be able to talk to animals and jinn. Al-Quran claims that the wind was made subservient to Solomon, and he could control it with his own will, and that the jinns also came under Solomon's control, strengthening his reign. And Al-Quran quote from Surah 34:12, "And to Solomon we made the wind obedient, and there were jinns that worked in front of him, and by the leave of the Lord, and if any of them turned aside from our command." Indeed, it's his command of the wind that is purported to be the source of his ability to travel long distances rapidly. I originally wrote down time travel there, and I do mean time travel, but it sort of has a somewhat different connotation in the West, doesn't it? So that's why I changed it. The shaitan, or demons, were forced into building monuments for him. Allah also caused a miraculous Ain, fount or spring of molten kitom, which is brass or copper, to flow for Solomon, to be used by the demons in their construction, and indeed I think in their binding. When David died, Solomon inherited his position as the prophetic king of the Israelites. Solomon once permitted a woman, according to Ars, she is Jerada, the daughter of a king that Solomon conquered and killed, to build a statue in honour of her father, but she began to worship the statue, and Solomon was rebuked for tolerating idolatry in his kingdom. According to Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, Allah had placed Solomon's powers and authority in his ring. Whenever he put it on, the jinns, the humans and the demons, the birds and all animals would be under his power and obey him. He'd sit on his throne, and Allah would send the wind to carry the throne, and to train and his train of demons, birds, animals, horses, etc. And they'd go wherever Solomon wanted to. So this is the sort of time travel I mentioned. As punishment for allowing the idolatry, Allah assisted one of the enslaved jinn to steal Solomon's ring and take over his kingdom. And this is mentioned in Surah 38:34. Suleiman later repents his sins and gains control over the jinn again, focusing once more on building the temple. He prayed to God to grant him his kingdom and that it should be unlike any other after him. God accepted Solomon's prayer and granted what he wished. Solomon's loss of the ring to the jinn may be understood to represent human losing its soul to demonic possession. Unlike the Talmudic tradition, Solomon was unaware and never participated in the idolatry. Furthermore, Al-Quran rejects that Solomon was a sorcerer. Solomon did not disbelieve, but the jinn disbelieved, teaching men magic, and it goes on. Surah 2:102. According to one tradition of Solomon, Alima, one of his wives, was entrusted with his ring whenever he went to the toilet or to visit one of his women. One day he left his ring with her, and when a sea Satan saw it, the latter came and assumed Solomon's form. He came to Amina, who ordered her to return the ring to him. He put it on, and as soon as he did, devils and jinns, humans, birds, and all animals put themselves under his command. When Solomon went out and sought his ring, he couldn't find it, of course. He therefore fled out and passed by the seashore. The children of Israel were said to be disgusted to see how Satan had assumed the form of Solomon. They went first to his mother and asked her, "Have you not noticed anything about Solomon's conduct, which you have found to be reprehensible?" She said, "He used to be the most kind of all people towards you, and now he openly disobeys me." So Solomon is revered as a wise king, a prophet, but not a sorcerer within Islam. Suleimanic magic in Indonesia. From what I can glean, Suleimanic magic is more common amongst Indonesian Muslims than Christians. Officially, Indonesia no longer has any Jews, so I can't comment on them. Christians do not tend not to use a particular magic, but would normally follow in local traditions. So in Medan, this could well be Buddhist. In Jakarta, maybe Taoist. In Jogja, it would certainly be Kejawen. It also appears to be much more popular in what Westerners would see conservative Muslim areas, which tend to be Western Indonesia, rather than places like Java that have its own magical tradition. Indeed, given that Suleimanic magic appears to be popular in Malaysia, in Singapore, I'd suggest that it's more popular amongst Malay people. However, we need to understand that Indonesia, in particularly Sumatra, has a very high number of Malays, in fact more than in Malaysia itself. These traditions appear to have come to Southeast Asia from the Sufi saints and merchants. Certainly, I would normally see Suleimanic magic as being more associated with the Sufi tradition. And my theory about the Malay people appears to be confirmed by Walter William Skeet in a book from 1900 called Malay Magic, which is about the Malay Peninsula, which shows many amulets and objects referring to Suleiman. Now, Al-Quran distinguishes between apparent magic, miracles sanctioned by Allah, and real magic. The first is that used by Solomon, who, being a prophet of Allah, is assumed to have miraculous powers with Allah's blessing. So putting a seal or a name of Solomon on a talisman or a ring or within a wafak, or also known as tawis, could simply be devotion to a prophet. Muslims also believe that Allah made an army of jinn obedient to him. Now this is the second form of magic that was taught by the evil ones, or al-Shayateen. So within some traditions, the binding and commanding of jinns is not seen as haram, i.e. forbidden, but permitted by Allah. Certainly binding jinns can be a part of ruqya or Islamic exorcism, although the focus is normally on getting them to submit to Allah. An interpretation that I myself struggle with, not least as I find imposing one's will and therefore binding to be against my understanding of Islam, and certainly against the experience of what works over the long term. And many Dukan in Indonesia will claim that jinn are evil, and even burn them in bottles, apparently. Furthermore, most Indonesian Muslims will claim that magic used for protection is permissible. Presumably using Suleimanic seals and rings can be justified in this way. Seals of Suleiman appear to be common across the region for centuries, but as I say, especially in Malay areas. Today these seals can be found on wafak and rings, which are commonly sold across the region. There's also a tradition of agate rings, often claimed to originate in Yemen, being seen as the seals of Suleiman. I've also heard of wafak or tawis being described as Suleimanic squares, but this may simply be a product of Suleiman being associated with magic. Although oils are used in ritual, they're often used as an alternative to aftershave, especially when visiting the masjid, and many of these will carry the name of Suleiman. I've also seen Suleimanic bowls used in Indonesia, which I more associate with the Middle East. Traditionally these would be copied in Sumatra, but I now believe that many are being copied in East Java. Now, having said that I associate Suleimanic magic more with Western Indonesia, my Javanese wife claims that it's used as powerful love pellets in Java. Indeed, she's adamant that our brother-in-law used this to entrap her eldest sister. Western magical books and artifacts such as Solomonic seals are commonly sold across the region. Again, I suspect mostly to Muslim. Indeed, the Lesser Key of Solomon is widely available. But these really don't fit into the tradition that I think I've uncovered, simply attesting to the prevalence of magic within Indonesia. Indeed, from what I can gather, although elements of the Lesser Keys of Solomon may appear within Indonesian Solomonic magic, there's much less emphasis on the pantheon of demons and the use of circles. That's not to say that some people don't follow the Western magical tradition and use the pantheon of demons within the Lesser Keys of Solomon. But I don't believe it's so common. What I think is much more common is that the seal and ring of Solomon are incorporated into local traditions for summoning jinn, or maybe simply for summoning the power of Solomon himself. Well, I really hope you've enjoyed this vlog. And if you have, can you help me out a little? Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and then you'll be notified of future vlogs. But also hit the like button and make a comment, because these seem to be what determine the YouTube algorithm, and I'm being really punished by it. So whatever help I can get from you is so appreciated. It really is. When I started this, I was going to do it this section, the real magic of Java. I was going to issue maybe every 2-3 months. Now it's happening maybe every 2 or 3 days. So yeah, if you hit the bell, you'll hear about it. And thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Really heartfelt thanks.